Buenos días.
Good morning. Welcome to our last day. We are some representatives of the development team, but down there we have all the rest of the team to talk with us. The idea of this conference, this is an open talk, and we can ask questions and make suggestions and, whatever you like. My name is Abierta. I've been with the development team of GeneXus, and also the question of the release of versions. Hello. Good morning. I work in iOS. Good morning. Martinez Gomez from the Department of Apps. Good morning. My name is Eugenio Garcia. I'm the pro manager of several of the programs of the suites, GeneXus, SAP, Flow. Gaston Milano. I'm in the development team of GeneXus. Microphone, please. Good morning. Claudia. Jose Lamas, GeneXus Server and GeneXus Cloud. My name is Fernando Paniza. Gonzalo. I'm sorry, I can't hear. The audio is not clear. Well, having introduced our representatives, we would like to give the floor to you. If you have a question, can we in the team ask questions? No, it's the people from the floor who can ask questions. Please raise your hand if you have any questions. So, good morning. I have a question, and I think that the community owes you a very important recognition to the work of GeneXus 16. You surprised us last year, and you go on surprising us. It's a pleasure to have known you for such a long time, and we have to recognize that you've done a gigantic job in many areas. And I think that you deserve a round of applause. All right, that's the end. Goodbye. Okay, good morning. My name is Viviana Garcia. I come from the Institute of Social Security of the province of La Pampa in Argentina. We've got a KB, which we made together with people from Action Point, who helped us a lot. But we are in Evolution 1, and we have this duty to take it to GeneXus 15, or to GeneXus 16, I don't know. I would like to know what advice would you give us so that we don't die in our attempt to do so. That depends on the components. I'm sorry, I can't hear. The sound is not clear. That's one of the steps, he says. We would have to see your reality and see what other steps you could take. There are some steps to be taken in the new instance of GeneXus server. There is a tool, and so you have to be careful not to lose track of the history. And then there is a tool to be able to compare and to navigate better. And so you can compare it you know what points to go over. So that's in all the documents of GeneXus 15 and 16, 14, and there are steps that would indicate what things to be considered. Obviously, you don't need to go over all the intermediate steps. So you have to open the version. You open the KB, and that's it. Well, the thing would be to do 100% of KB instead of migrating through modules, or you do it directly, 100% of the KB. Yes. Well, if it's win, okay, no, it's not. All right. So it would be the entire KB, and then in production, you'll see what happens. If you have to use apps, all right. Now, from the standpoint of the KB, you are going to make the entire conversion from the standpoint of migration in operations. When there are big things, what you do is fragment it in different functionalities, and you keep the basis in the previous version, and you include new functionalities of what you are migrating. So it's a question of processing operations, really. From the technical standpoint, the knowledge base, you can, well, convert it fully. Good morning. Gabriel Martinez from Mar del Plata, Argentina. I haven't heard if in GeneXus 16, the RPG, it's not win. Yes, that's right. And about GX server, some time ago we went over it, and we had requested this because we have a KB core, and they would share objects, but we didn't have one centralized KB. So we solved it by building a meta data. Is GeneXus server going to take that into account to do something similar? Well, I don't understand. You say for code or core, or well, we've got what generates the P. We have got several satellites, but although they are independent, they share several objects, transition of objects. We have web, we have Java Win, so we can't mix them up in just one, because it would be a KB that we won't be able to manage. So what we've done is to use the GX server, but we didn't have the possibility of saying, is there a KB on the database, and that could tell us where the object comes from, or right. GX server would manage the traceability of changes in the KB, but what you're talking about is a question of organizing objects among KBs, and the solution to that is obviously a core KB with certain transactions and certain requirements, and perhaps the user interface, well, at least some of those KBs are centralized, and you update the rest. This is done either with export or change defender, but then the server, in fact, takes part in the traceability dimensions of each one of the KBs. There is also the line of the modules, and there are some things that can solve this out fully. So they aren't there. So it's a question of organizing the KBs rather than working with GeneXus server. Thank you. Gustavo Rossi from Salta. Gaston mentioned that in spite of the synchronic to asynchronic, and I would like to know whether he can give us further details about that. What are you going to implement? Yes. The second part of your question, well, I really don't know when. As Ursula said, we made a development. Let me explain the beginning. The department wouldn't like to commit itself to a date, because I could tell you, from now in 4 months' time we may have something in trans, but from there to go to the stable line will depend on how stable that feature is. So even if I tell you that I want it for that date, until I don't generate any type of integration with things that are already stable, I won't be able to do so. But what we are doing is, and what I mentioned, is a specification of what an application is, and basically to try and sum it up somehow. In the same way we have data sources. I mean, we are at the specification phase. We are still discussing it, and we are going to go on for some time in that phase to know exactly what we're going to do. But we're basically going to have the possibility that someone declares an event from real life. In the same way we've created transaction entities, we can create events with their own features, and we can declare it and say, in the same way as with data source, we may have an event source, so every dynamo, whatever. And then you'll have the possibility that objects such as procedures or any other objects may be subscribed to whenever such an event occurs, or there may be someone saying, I'm going to publish this event. As we said in the example, suppose a goal is scored, and let's suppose you have several KBs, and they are all looking at the same event source, and it's declared what the scheme for a goal is, somehow similar to a transaction. And so someone will be able to subscribe and say, all right, I would like to subscribe to whenever a goal is scored, and there is someone who is going to be in charge of publishing the goal through the technology that makes it that it's in the data source. It could be Kafka technology, so that the system is awoken. I don't know if I've been clear, but when you publish a goal, so instead of scoring a goal, I publish an event, and those who want to listen when a goal was scored would subscribe to that, and they would be notified depending on the technology and so on. But that's going to be hidden in each one of the data sources, and that's going to be different for each data source. Kafka is going to be one thing, Dynamo is going to do something else. It's going to be a relational database following the same scheme. So the scheme is independent of the data source. I could do an independent event-driven, a relational database, and most certainly, the one that it's by default first, would say, well, we are going to implement this mechanism directly in the data source. But there are cases such as the Panama Canal, which this concept of event-driven is used by resorting to other hubs like Kafka, for instance. So the important thing is that it's not only us transmitting or broadcasting this type of events, but there are other ones, saying, well, a ship has arrived and our system has to transaction, and so we can subscribe to the event of a ship has arrived, you know, depending on the type of events I want to listen to. Or I don't know if it's clear.
¿Se escucha? Ah, perdón. No, agregándole a Gastón, quiere...
Well, at present, Genexus already has this type of things done, like publishing, you know, this type of things. And that's the type of data that we can work with. Well, Kafka also has that. It's not only 16, but we've introduced an external object around Kafka, and you can do it already. But what I'm saying is that we're going to have it in a programming model, a more natural way. But you can already do all these things, you know, with this object or, yeah. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Voy a aprovechar, voy a hacer un comentario.
I would like to make a comment. As regards processes, she says, we know what is TRAN, what's stable, and TRAN is basically what we are working with, where we make fixes, and that becomes public, and we are working on it continually. When there is a fix, and we move it to the stable channel, and on that basis, well, we have to see what the following upgrades are, and so we have an upgrade there with KBs and improving the previous one. When we do trans, well, it's what we are working on every day, and it's public when we want to participate. When it's stable, it's mature, and it's tested, and then it's public. I've got two very prosaic questions. Something that a client asked us is to continue working on the web. You know, key controls, it's a very simple thing. I'm sorry, it's very difficult to understand what the speaker is saying. The sound is not clean. Very difficult to understand what he's saying in Spanish. There's noise. There is noise, and the sound is not clean.
Ojalá por ahí lo puedan tener en cuenta. Otra cosa un poco más sofisticada es la siguiente. Yo planteé esta cuestión en los foros muchas veces.
I've asked this question several times in the forum. The answer has been given by other users, and the answer isn't very ambitious. And I think it refers to transactions. Many times it happens that we need that a transaction is a bit more complex than simply confirming or canceling. For instance, sale or things like that, you know, you have to save only. Save and continue, or save and issue, or so at the end of the day there are several ways of confirming. You know, when you want to go back, we want to warn the users that there are some data involved, and we have solved it. In one case, we've got several buttons which leave a trace, And so we retrieve the trace of the mark, and we go back or continue. And in the case of cancellation, we manage it, and we keep the badge, and we do it. But we should solve it. But what happens is that we are a little bit outside that. We would like to find a solution to it. So I went to the forums, and now what happens is that when I listen to that, I think that we can see the use of the transaction. And I would like to know what your idea is. I don't know how important you think this is, but my company is interested in using transactions at that level.
Ahora, déjame contestar primero las cosas, digamos.
Well, with regard to the power user, for example, I agree. We would have to see what other combinations. It's not something minor. The implementation is minor, but our idea is to have accelerators and shortcuts, because it's something it's something that is also chasing at, and it's one of the important things. If we don't have it for some things, we definitely need it for others. It's not the idea to take away the shortcuts. All of the options in the menu have the shortcuts, if I understand it correctly. There may be some that don't, but our idea is that in the next versions, we will be able to configure such things. But we don't leave aside, we don't abandon the usability of the Windows IDE. We are going to do several changes around it, and the shortcuts are important. Do you want to answer something else? Well, I'm sorry, we cannot hear the speaker. The mic is not working for us. Again, so sorry, it's impossible to interpret because we cannot hear the speaker in the booth.
Sí. Eso,
todas formas, a nivel conceptual más alto, sí. Nosotros lo que queremos seguir es fomentando el uso de las transacciones y también la interfaz de usuario de las transacciones. De hecho, agregándole más interfaces de usuario a las transacciones, ya no de las de web, sino de las de OData y de las PC.
Sí, a ver.
Específicamente en las de UI, sí, habíamos hablado de eso y
a ver, yo creo que hay una más conceptual.
There's one that is more conceptual. Firstly, we are not going to incorporate things to the transactions. Actually, the user controls that can be declared inside the knowledge base has a user control that I can create. It's a button with the look and feel that I want, and I can tell it that it is a button, and I can use it in a transaction. I can make it do different things. I can go to the transaction and say, I take out the configure of the transaction and I put in my button. We are not forgetting the transactions, not even close. But I believe that there will be less transactions of data input for other reasons, like interfaces, as I was saying. It's complicated to be filling forms, even if it's in the web, it's complicated. In mobile, there are less and less forms. and the codes now, and conceptually we need to try to eliminate the forms because they generate friction, and the forms are more simple now. It's more a question of experience, but when it is right to do it, then we keep the transactions, we don't abandon them. Good morning, Guillermo from Mar del Plata. Working with objects, you push them right or left, and if you see all of the range of objects, it's complicated. I may have a group of selected objects. I'm sorry, I cannot understand him in the booth.
Vos sabés que no, no te entendí en dónde, en qué.
Sorry, I didn't understand what you were talking about, what dialogue.
No sé.
Y me ha pasado mil veces que...
Una pregunta, ¿estás hablando del working set, del Gorbidoye, cuando se mueven a la derecha?
Sí.
Es un panel que hay a la derecha.
Sí, pero ahora se sacó, ¿no?
Ahora ya no está más, si te voy a decir, en vez de 16 no está más, no sé de
Se
cuándo.
pinean, se hacen ping de los objetos y se quedan en...
Vos estás comentando justamente de, ya cambió en B15, no sé en qué upgrade de 15 ya cambió.
U10 igual.
Sí.
Tendríamos que ver cuándo cambió, y ahora lo que se hace es se marca en la lista con un pin cada objeto y ahí le das el build, digamos. Cambió la manera, hay que ver si tiene el error que vos comentás, lo vemos con alguien de soporte, a ver si sigue pasando o no. Pero en principio ya la funcionalidad no está como vos la comentás, ya está cambiada, y vemos si el error que vos comentás sigue pasando o no.
Okay.
La segunda.
El manejo de las versiones, de los upgrades, está bueno. Estamos felices que estén cada 2 meses. Tenemos muchas KBs, que a veces están en producción o en testing, en determinado grade. Tenemos 3, 4, 5 de la nueva versión. Tenemos 4 de la 15, por ejemplo. Si me equivoco, al abrir una KB, porque aparecen todas en la lista, de alguna versión anterior, no me avisa. ¿Ok? Entonces, por ahí siempre para ustedes nos avisen que estamos cambiando o haciendo tal grade o a una versión.
Sí, sí, es
Más uno.
Digamos, sí. Tenemos varios requerimientos de eso y ya sí, queremos hacerlo. De hecho, queremos que cada vez se hagan menos cosas y
Yes, we want to do it. We want to do things more explicitly, but we have eliminated things so that if you had done something wrong, you get information in the dialogue too. So we are going to be doing something in this regard, and it's not so costly, and it has high efficiency.
Hola. Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Como sou do Brasil, vou misturar um pouco, não?
Tudo bem.
Nos temas que trago, que me pediram do Brasil, é algo mais simples, pero que...
Sorry, but questions from the audience cannot be heard in the booth. The mics they are using are not working for us, and we cannot interpret.
Genera o código dos SDTs e já genera os objetos que estão declarados estes SDTs, né? Seria porque as cabeças estão muito grandes e demora muito a ser um build, né? Isso nos ajudaria muito. Outro tema é fazer um build with only em um webpan, por exemplo, e generar o SDT que está junto, porque algumas vezes cambiamos o SDT e se um build with only como não genera o código del SDT, né? Seria grande ajuda isso.
Sí. Vamos a trabajar en varias de esas.
We are going to work on several of these things. We want to improve the build experience, And it's one of the things we are going to start working immediately or very soon. Some of the things you talked about explicitly, and others will be optimized. All of these things are useful. So we have to look at the order of things. I have had other requests in that direction. And our idea is that you suggest things and that we can work in a very agile manner and work on what you suggest. Sometimes it will be things as explicit as possible. As you said, there may be a clash because in the web panel you may want to have the SDT touched, and there may be a clash, as I said, but we are going to be working on this with the build team.
Agora, cambiando pouco, nos objetos que não são pop-up, o código HTML generado é um iframe. Não sei se com as outras pessoas, com os outros desenvolvedores, ocurre muito, mas às vezes me cai mal o HTML que carga dentro do iframe. Não sei, há uma diferença nos navegadores. Imagino, por exemplo, poder chamar uma web component. O pop-up não generado no iframe. Não sei se isso cai bem e não generar no iframe.
Sí.
Bueno, lo hemos discutido. Los iframes han sido una solución hasta ahora, pero a veces nos traen algún dolor de cabeza. Como bien lo decís, cuando se trata de múltiples o distintos navegadores, a veces hay diferencias que nos dan dolores de cabeza a nosotros para poder uniformizar. Y bueno, no como web component, porque la idea es que para ustedes sea transparente, pero sí que podamos abrir la pop-up y que el contenido esté embebido en el mismo documento. O sea, a futuro es lo que queremos. Vamos para ese lado.
¿Aló? ¿Aló? Sí, yo de nuevo. Ya que hablaron de incluso cuando hablaron del tema de testing, ¿cómo están testeando?
Again, apologies, but it's impossible to hear in the booth what the people from the audience are saying because the mics are not working. They're using are not heard in the booth.
Intenta seguir compilando el objeto antiguo y es un lío. No sé si me explico. O sea, tenían un módulo, crean su módulo de objeto.
Si es eso, es un error y hay que arreglarlo. Si hay que reportarlo, sí. O sea,
Indeed, it's an error and it has to be fixed. It has to be reported. I think that some things have already been fixed in the modules, but it should never fail. It may be an error in compilation and it shouldn't fail. Unless tomorrow when we start doing things for which you need to make more decisions, it happens. But the way it's now, we calculate the trends and what has to be done, and it shouldn't fail.
Ahí oigo.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Yokoi from Japan. I talk about notification on Android. Now Google changing functionality, messaging functionality from GCM to FCM. FCM is Firebase cloud messaging. My question is, when Genesis release notification with FCM?
Traducir la pregunta.
La pregunta. Sí, bueno, lo que me está preguntando es que en Genesis tenemos GCM como default de canal de notificaciones, que era el default de Google ya hace un tiempo, que es Google Cloud Notification, y ahora pasamos a usar FCM, que es Firebase. Eso ya está implementado en lo que es el trunk, en lo que viene a ser, como dijo Ana, el canal de beta ya está implementado ahí. Esperemos tenerlo pronto en algún upgrade de la B16. Como digo, no te puedo prometer cuándo, pero sí, seguramente lo vamos a poner en un upgrade próximo de la B16. Además, déjame aclararte que lo que estamos recomendando es usar otro proveedor de notification, que es OneSignal, que ese ya por defecto está parado arriba de Firebase, digamos.
We have thought of using another provider with a better behavior, and it works quite all right with lots of burden, of weight, than the default provider. And let me say something here.
We're going to see how we can move the stable channel, but in general, probably it could be the upgrade 1 or upgrade 2, okay? But anyway, there's another provider that is called OneSignal that you can use now, okay? And this is recommended. We are recommending to use this provider. You understand me, or okay. It's okay? It's okay? Okay. Thank you.
Anything else that you'd like to add? That's all right.
¿Alguna otra pregunta?
Any other questions?
Hola, buenos días, soy de...
Good morning, I'm from Brazil. At present, from my standpoint, we have several restrictions to generate packages of modules. I would like to know which are the next steps and when we have an option to generate packages with transactions and panels to put in these modules in other knowledge bases. Well, yes, we are working, and this is not even in the trunk, but some things have already been codified in the machines of some developers. We are going to be lifting some restrictions around the modules. Some of them are easy, others are a bit more difficult, more complicated. The first one we're going to lift out of the very complicated ones. There are several smaller ones. If you've got a module where you can have access to transactions, but you're not going to expose the transactions. I mean, the module requires the use in the database, but it doesn't want to put it in the other one that was going to be reused. That's the first step that we're taking. Then we're going to go on so that you can put in transactions, but the most likely case in the upgrade 1 or upgrade 2, depending on everything I said earlier about the channels, about the channels, right? You could expose something similar to GAM. In fact, the GAM we've got is not an object that exposes transactions, but uses them, and we want the same GAM expose it as a module. So we needed it, and we're going to make it available so that you can use it. For instance, the use of K2B, which is an ERP, would be also using that. That is to expose modules that are using transactions, but to the inside, but to the outside, expose interfaces, because that's what they're going to be using directly. Now, the next step, which will take us, obviously it comes after the first one. There we need to see that you can have a module exposing transactions. So that's a road, in fact, ahead that we've thought about. I'm Sydney from Brazil. We all know that it takes some time. It takes us a long time to have this. I would like to know whether you are trying to do things so that all these things are ready more quickly. What's your generator, Java? Is there any improvement for Java? We are working quite a lot, trying to improve the time frame. If you said that they are bad now, you can't imagine what they were before. Well, they're not that bad, but we always want more. The way of working is that we do things now in a more efficient manner. We can see your case in particular, where we can continue improving. Well, this is a specific case. I think it's a case that we all have. Part of the time that we work is that we are waiting for things to be compiled. Well, the compilation time, is it compilation time or building? No, it's the full time since you stop it. So I'm going to give the floor back to Aston because compiling time is doing fine. So that's none of my, and so he already has all the tricks up his sleeve. He's already working there for 20 years. So now we know that in the compilation part, and that's what I was asking you about the generator, we are working on .NET, improving compiling. Now the trouble is to compile the class, and that's what Ignacio said was true. And he's been with us for 20 years, and he always tells the truth. What we want is to change the order of the build process, not of the entire process, where you have the specification, the generation, and the compilation. And in fact, the approach of the problem has many angles. One thing is to do things explicitly or not do it explicitly, and the other one is to change the order of each one of those parts. We've done some of those things. We've tried to use gross force and multi-core specifications in background, multiple specifiers or generators. But we are going to focus on how to change the order of each one of those things. We used our tools, and we know that's a value point that we have to focus on, and we will in the short term. I really can't tell you what the solutions will be. There are many ideas around, and we have to see the ones that hurt the most. And is it compilation that really hurts you, or is it all the other steps? Because I think, well, it's all. Many times a variable is changed, and it goes all around it. Well, that kind of thing is the type of thing that we're going to attack: the granularity, the dependence, and then when the specification is done. We are going to be working on that. Let's hope that next year, in this same place, we can see one of those things. But you're going to be seeing it along the year in this continuous development. Even in web, we've done things. We've done things with CCDT, but we would like to take it as a whole. Well, every single point that we gain or that we save in time, it's a lot. Good morning. Well, be happy. It looks as if you were being interrogated. Well, we work in several platforms, in games. And last year, we dare outsource GeneXus. You know me because I've been around for a while. And this year, we are interested in IoT. IoT is a large market for us because we are interacting with lots of games and elements that are collateral. Now, how's this going? We are going to be using IoT, and so how are you going about it so that we can make some test analysis in your with you, and whether IoT has a possibility of making tests, because they are asking us for full reliability. The companies buying games are asking us for that, the electronic parts, sensors, and so on and so forth. I don't want to take too long, so that they are reliable. So in case they, because they want to make games more modern, it's not a question of taking the joysticks and, it's an interaction. Because at world level, what they want is that young people shouldn't be sitting down. In China, young people would sit down for hours and on end. All that question of the pedagogy and the human side of it. So I would also like to congratulate you because on the lectures, because I heard very interesting things about IoT, and go on. Very well. Well, it's a gigantic thing.
El área de Thales Lab, digamos.
We have Thales Lab area, and we've created it particularly for that, to be able to test it and innovate in areas that haven't been that much explored. And then once those things mature, we have to bring them down to reality. So we've done things with IoT, for different areas, for medicine, to that's very interesting. Managing noise, controlling noise in a city, for instance. There are many projects that have used GenXus to do things in experimenting. Well, you'll have to see what you want to experiment, and I would like to invite you to contact Silvia Cheve, who is the director of Thales Lab, to see what we're talking about exactly. So we'll have to see your case. We've all
base de conocimiento, GenXus IoT Server, donde básicamente con una de estas startups que ha estado trabajando con Thales Labs, lo que hicimos fue generar todo el backend necesario para recabar los datos de los sensores, definir toda una metadata dinámica, obviamente.
We have to define dynamic metadata in order to define the sensors and the way in which data are presented. There is a knowledge base that is open and you can use and clearly helps you to experiment. It can be a path when you are preparing the first pilots. Obviously, the hardware, we receive it from the startups, and they will see if the information of the sensors is going to the servers, and then if you want to scale it up, then it will depend on the cases. There will probably be a platform in the cloud of the great providers that will offer the IoT hubs, where you will have all of the infrastructure when you want to install. We are talking about thousands of sensors, thousands of data per second. But in order to start doing, at least you have this knowledge base that is well documented, and you can find it in GenXus, and we have cases of people who have done things already. So there you can bring the parts together. One more question. Last question. Good morning. I would like to ask something about GAM. It would be interesting that in the back office of GAM, in the part of users management, we had access to extended attributes. Usually, we have solved it by putting a button, but every time there's an upgrade, it steps on our update, and we have to add it again. It's a minor thing. Alejandro, have we added it or not yet? Well, this is a question we have been assessing, and we're going to review it. Anyway, with regard to the back end of GAM, we have other ideas with respect to the module, etc. And possibly in the future, the backend will not be overwritten. It will be a component that comes pre-compiled, like we do with the client of Flow. Those are ideas that we are assessing for the future. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much to the GenX's team. There's only some of us here, and we hope you will be enjoying this event. We have quite interesting talks that will make you feel like going to Mars. At least for me, it's quite intriguing. So enjoy the event, and thank you so much for coming.